Well, my father was a musician. My father, we're originally from Italy, southern Italy. My father was a saxophone clarinet player. And after the war, my sisters also played piano. So we always had music in the home. After the war, my father came to America to meet my mother with my two sisters and older brother. And they settled in Westchester County of New York, where I was born with a twin and a younger brother. Well, I believe that at the beginning, jazz was a part of the family because of the love my father had for it. Very importantly, especially in Europe, the American artists were something that they really idolized. To get a record of a famous jazz artist from America was gold. They played it till it was no longer playable. So in my home, jazz was a part of our growing up. Well, I did a loop to come to New York City. Once I graduated high school, I went to the University of Georgia and played baseball. I played there for about a year and a half, and I realized that it wasn't really fitting well with me, and I came back to New York. And I did my senior year at NYU, and I stayed and did my graduate work there. And I loved it because I lived in the village. Music became, it was also there for the taking, and I loved music, and it was a perfect fit for me to come back to New York. For me, I think when I look back in my life, baseball was great, but I think that music in New York City is where I needed to be. Well, when I first came to NYU, it was a tremendous folk scene going on and a pop scene going back then. And I remember going to class and then afterwards, which was so much fun, hitting the small shops, the Bottom Line, Cafe Wa, the Village Gate, places like this. There were always little coffee shops, somebody playing, someone singing, Bob Dylan, the Joan Baez era. So, and then of course there was the Fillmore East where we got into the more pop and rock. And mind you, coming back to New York, I was still rather young. So the kind of music that I gravitated to at that time was more what was in, at that time was the pop, the rock, the folk music. So jazz really came a little later. I remember studying. I actually played sax and clarinet along with my brother. I have a twin brother, and each evening we would alternate one night to the next night. And it was something my father, more or less, he insisted we all played music. I, at that time, didn't like the fact that we were, required to play every night after dinner. But I found that as I got older, my father allowed me to stretch out, and I became a bass player. So I became an electric bass player, played a Fender precision bass for years in rock and blues bands. So coming to New York at that time with the little clubs, it fit well for me. Jazz came a little later, and it was all progression to where we are today. Let's do it. Okay, you ready? Gianni Valenti.